Hey everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we're looking in 1 Peter 4, verses 12 through 19. Another short section. Most of the sections in 1 Peter, actually most of all the first, second, from all everything from Peter is kind of short little snippets. His letters aren't real long and they're kind of brief and the things that he covers real quick. So we'll look at this and then kind of look at the notes real quick. 1 Peter 4, 12 through 19. Dear friends, don't be surprised at the fiery trials you are going through as if something strange were happening to you. Instead, be very glad, for these trials make you partners with Christ in his suffering, so that you will have the wonderful joy of seeing his glory when it is revealed to all of the world. If you are insulted because you bear the name of Christ, or Christian is kind of where this came from, you will be blessed, for the glorious Spirit of God rests upon you. If you suffer, however, it must not be for murder, stealing, making trouble, or prying into other people's affairs, but it is no shame to suffer for being a Christian. Praise God for the privilege of being called by his name, for the time has come for judgment, and it must begin with God's household. And if judgment begins with us, what terrible fate waits those who have never obeyed God's good news? And also, if the righteous are barely saved, what will happen to the godless sinners? So if you are suffering in a manner that pleases God, keep on doing what is right and trust your lives to the God who created you, for he will never fail you. And so I don't have a lot on this one because it's kind of a like Peter's kind of rolling again like through a couple times of the things that he's already said. But here he instructs Christians one last time about the way to face the trials that basically are inevitably going to come, and he says, "Don't be surprised." And there's a couple times where, like, I like that he says this. Don't be surprised when this happens. There's so many times where, like, especially us, I think modern Christians, especially in America, we've gotten spoiled, and we're shocked. It's like, oh my gosh, so this can you believe this happened? It's like, no, it's the world, right? We and we shouldn't be. It's no fun, right? And I'm not saying we shouldn't it shouldn't bother us or something like that, but we shouldn't be like surprised by this. And often we are surprised because we really haven't had to suffer anything for Christ, and so when we see it happen or we experience something happen, it's kind of a shock to our system a little bit. And so Christians, especially those seeking to lead godly lives, should expect to face the hostility of a sinful world. We should do that, and then that's why he's constantly talking about suffering for doing good. Like, it doesn't make sense. Why would we suffer for doing good? Because there's people out here that doesn't matter what you do. If you do it in the name of Christ, you could cure cancer in the name of. But if it's done in the name of Christ, then there's going to be something wrong with it, and so and you'd get attacked for it. And so that's what you got to learn to expect that. And so Christians are called to suffer, and that's the one thing that we miss out. I think we miss in the teachings of and the American church especially, is we miss the idea that, like, we're actually told we're going to, and we should expect to suffer. And so we shouldn't really be complaining about it. And it's like we should see that as a sign that, wow, you are Christ-like because you're suffering just like Christ. That's what Peter kind of reminds them of. And so, Christians are called to suffer with Christ in order to be glorified with him. And he says, be happy when you're insulted, right? Yeah, like someone calls you a name, be happy about it. But the idea is literally you are blessed when you are when you're insulted, right? You're blessed because it reflects Jesus's teaching in Matthew 5. If you want to go back and read Matthew 5, 11, and 12, you can look at that, right? That's some of the teachings. And so the other thing that we see here is like Peter talks about being called a Christian and bearing the name of Christ. We call ourselves Christians now as a badge of honor of who we follow. Back then, it looks like, from what we can tell, at least a lot of um, scholars believe this, is that the first term Christian was actually an insult. It's like, look at these kind of superstitious people who practice these weird things, right? So it was kind of an insult that was hurled at them, and so it was like, you be proud of bearing that name, right? Even though you're just an insult to you. Now it's not considered an insult. It's just someone who we are. It's a label of those who follow Christ. But back then, it was more of most scholars believe, anyways, it seemed to be along the line of an insult or some sort of insult. So, just like Peter here is reminding everyone, right, that there's going to be, or more than likely will be, suffering for being a Christian. There's going to be some sort of persecution for being a Christian. Now, a lot of it depends on the area of the world you live in, right? In America, the suffering we experience, really, don't know if we want to classify it as suffering, especially compared to some of those who are truly dying for their Christian faith in other parts of the world. But, especially in this time, they were. And it's something that, even though we're not at this time, that we need to look not forward to, but look into the future and say, this is a possibility. So that way we're prepared for it when it does happen. Okay, Peter talked about this, Jesus talked about this, Paul talked about this, all the apostles, right, the writers of the New Testament, they talked about the fact that, okay, we're more than likely going to have to suffer for Christ. The early church did for sure, right? We're kind of in a pause from that, in the American church, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't say, hey, it could still happen, and look for it to come, because that way we're ready for it. Because if we don't, then we're not going to be ready for it. Then it's going to be a shock to the system. And I think a lot of times that's what happens when we see this happen to the church. It's almost like a pruning of the church that happens when hard times or something does happen. Then you just see all these people leave the church. It's like, oh, well, no, I didn't sign up for this. It's like, well, have you not been reading the New Testament? It's like, have you not been reading what Jesus called you to, what the apostle says was going to happen? And so sometimes I think we're not teaching on that enough. And maybe we need to focus on that a little bit more and say, hey, these are things that we should expect. I mean, Jesus said, carry your cross, right? To carry a cross. Well, that meant in that time that you were going to your death. And so that, when Jesus said that, he wasn't like just being like, oh, here's some symbolism. He was being literal. And so we need to make sure that we're teaching that, and slowly bringing people into that as we teach them. I don't think it's something we should dive headfirst into, right? But slowly over time, I think Jesus took that approach. He didn't just come out and right away with his apostles and say, take up your cross. It was toward the end of his ministry. If you watch, he would slowly make it a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder to be his disciple. And I think that's something we can mimic in our own ministry, in our own making of disciples, to say, hey, a little bit harder here. This is a little bit harder. Now this is a little bit harder, but to expect these type of things when they happen. So, as always, I hope that you learn from these. I hope that you pick up something from them. I know talking about suffering and things like that is not fun, but it's about it's goes along with the territory of being a Christian, and so we have to talk about the good things, we have to talk about the bad things, and the things that are to be expected. And so I do hope that you're learning from. As always, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, do that, please. That way you can follow along with us, and as we continue to release and do more things. And as always, I appreciate everyone who takes time to watch these, and I hope y'all have a wonderful day.